As I've said, I am not an expert on horror movies. I'm not a connoisseur. I'm a casual observer. I don't like slasher, and I avoid demons, which eliminates probably half of all horror movies. Just guessing. But there is an exception in that I love good monster movies. Alien, Jaws, Tremors, Jurassic Park, all great. I haven't seen many ghost horror movies, so I'm not sure about my opinion of them. Poltergeist was great, though. And I was in a stage play of The Innocents, aka The Turn of the Screw, but it wasn't that scary. I think horror has trouble on stage because of the literal distance the audience has. But with those caveats out of the way, I have a controversial opinion. So starting with American Horror Story back in, what was that, 2012? Dang it, 2011. I've been a year off on almost every guess recently. I'm slipping. This is the beginning of the end. Anyway, since then, there's been a growing market for long-form horror series. Admittedly, a horror series in concept isn't anything new. I mean, my gosh, have you seen Night Gallery? The story with the painting is... That one messed with me a little bit. But that is the kind of thing that horror series used to be. The Monster of the Week shows like X-Files would have horror in them. Creepshow, even shows like Star Trek would have occasional scary episodes. But horror in TV used to be limited to these one-off episodes. But now we've entered an era where Monster of the Week is dead. Anthologies were extinct until Black Mirror, and all shows must be exclusively long form, it feels like. They have to be extended series designed to be watched as a binge over, however long. So far, they've been wise enough to keep the series limited to one season, like The Haunting of Bly Manor or House of Usher. But something I've consistently heard about these kinds of series is that while the series usually starts strong and has some quality moments, few are known for having satisfactory endings. And most of them have people complaining an episode or two before the end that things aren't what they were at the beginning. So my question is this: is a good long-form horror series possible? So first off, I need to define my terms. I do not mean a long-form series where scary things happen. Stranger Things certainly has horror aspects to it, but it's a conglomeration of a lot of genres, and I don't think that I'd label the whole show as just horror. For a good horror story, this is what the goal should be. The beginning introduces a problem with a bang, like a murder or something, or it begins with just a little whisper, some kind of creeping dread. Things aren't what they should be. Then, as the story progresses, the tension escalates and ramps up. There might be, spikes in it where someone is killed or they're in a near-death situation, and ebbs where two characters have a quiet conversation, but the tide of the tension is constantly rising. We do not return to that base level until the story is over. The really good horror stories manage that constant rise and just never let up. And that is admittedly really hard to do correctly. It is why every list of the greatest horror movies ever made is the same list, because the quality of those films is so obvious that no one ever contests it. But it is also why most of the great horror stories that are told are novellas or short stories. Dracula can be read in 5 hours if you buckle down. There are some amazing horror short films too. Did you see the one that Lights Out was based on? That was terrifying. There have been some great horror novels. Most of them are relatively short with a few exceptions, and almost all those exceptions are written by Stephen King, who has been criticized about his endings. A shorter novel means you can read the whole thing in a day if you really get down to it, which means you can feel that unease and that growing tension for the whole day. It and The Shining kind of got around this by having a number of highly unnerving vignettes where the ending was just the most extreme one. But my point in saying all that is you need your audience to feel that rising tide of tension. And the longer you try to make it last and build at an equal pace, the harder it is. Either it has to be a very, 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 very slow build, or you're giving your audience a heart attack with the levels of stress you've achieved by the ending. So it is possible for you to have a perfectly paced, long horror story that brings your audience to a crescendo of horror at the end. But what if they don't watch it all in one sitting? There's the rub. Haunting at Bly Manor was 8 hours long. I doubt anyone's watching that in one sitting. You're at least taking like a sandwich break or something. And since Netflix drops all of its episodes at once, you don't know when they're going to have to tap out for a break as the creator. So each episode has to assume that you're starting over at square one. In the case of American Horror Story, they premiered an episode a week. In the case of horror, you have to keep people engaged in the atmosphere, in the moment, etc. And that does not carry over between viewings. This is why most of these have pretty strong buzz about the first couple of episodes, the ones that you watch in that first sitting. The first episode pulls you in, establishes your baseline, starts that tension rise, but then each episode has to be responsible for pulling you up to the correct level in case that's the one that you came back to. A movie can start you out at 0, then slowly crank it up until you get to the end and you're at 100. But an episode may end with you at 25. You leave until the next night, and then you're personally back down to a 0. So the episode has to try to yank you back up to 25, or just start the process over and crank you up faster than the previous episode because the story is escalating. And that's just from, say, episode 2 to 3. Between the second to last and the last, what do you need to be at when you start that last episode? 90? 95? Because you're getting to the end. You need to be at peak tension. The first few episodes of a series can be that ideal slow pace of increasing tension, but the final episodes need to ramp you up quickly. And that's not really possible. So what I'm getting at is I don't think that a good long-form horror series is possible. By all means, have long-form series with horror elements. But the horror shouldn't be the point. It stops being scary by the end. Happy Halloween? You'll see me next time if you subscribe. Bye.